And here we are back with the Business Not As Usual podcast. Thank you for joining us, whether you're here live or you're listening on your podcast player or watching us on video via the YouTubes or wherever. We welcome you. I'm one half of the co-hosting team, Vince Mirabelli, and with me as always,
the other half
of the
co-hosting duties, Michael Martino. What's going on, Vince?
Mikey, not a lot.
Not a lot.
This is just going to be an episode where we don't talk about, and this is going to be like one of those Seinfeld episodes.
We don't talk about anything.
We're not going to talk about anything. We're just going to talk about stuff. No, we're just obviously that's not gonna play very well. But I know that you've got something on your mind, given some recent events. So, I'm just going to kick it over to you for the introductions.
Well, lately, we started off strong in the COVID when COVID hit, and there was a lot of change, a lot of culture change. There was a lot of change in business. And now that we seem to have come, comfortable working from home, and a lot of people are starting to go back to the office, I've noticed people falling back into old habits and reverting back to the great strides. And we've heard it, you've read about it, you've seen it in your favorite articles and on different podcasts, and I'm seeing people starting to revert back to bad habits or things prior to all of us, heading off and working remotely. And so maybe we should talk about that, because I thought we, as like an industry, we made great strides in moving the needle towards a new business, right? Business not as usual. Not the same old, not working in the same old way or creating the same old outcomes. And so I think today we should remind everyone about, the things that we accomplished in the last 5 months and not to lose that, to go back to bad or back to the old ways of doing work.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's an interesting topic. And I know that we can probably have a lot to say about it, because I'm sure that there are people and organizations who, as soon as we moved into the distributed by default mode, were already planning the return. They saw this as a Band-Aid temporary solution.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the intent was, let's get back to the office as soon as we can, so that we can get back to the real work, because this is we're just trying to make it through.
Right.
But once we get back to the office, that's when the real work starts again. And I think that view is very flawed, because I really truly don't think there is a going back to the old way. And I think people are just reverting to the comfort of the default.
Yes. The comfort of, and even in the going back, we're not going to go back to the way it was pre-March. It's going to be a blended world of how we work. And so I think that's a good time to talk about not falling back into the trap of going back. Like, we're going to be back, and it's going to be back to pre-March. And that's not going to happen. There's going to be a blended way of working. But some of the things I'm seeing, and it's happened both in public and private sector. Right off the bat, what happened was this, and everyone talked about it. In government agencies, there was like this breaking down of silos. So different ministries came together. In private companies, the silos started falling because things need to get done across the organization. And one of the big things I saw was also titles don't matter. That was a big thing early on. Titles don't matter. We just need to get the work done. And we started going down that route, and it was working very well. But now that we've all become comfortable, the rise of the silo is back. and
Mhm.
that completely stops a business transformation. I had
Right.
high hopes right at the beginning. I
Yeah.
saw the breaking down of silos, but I see them back on the rise.
Right. Well, and again, it speaks to the earlier point, right? Of the intent was always to go back,
Right.
and especially in public agencies, not publicly traded, but public agencies, organizations, ministries, departments, whatever. Um, the words titles don't matter are nice. And I think for the first little bit, it was
It
true.
was
Like
it
it
was
was
working
true
like that. Yep.
because you had to, right? But
Things had to get done.
they had
The
to get done,
artificial barriers came down.
right. But in public agencies, public organizations, titles are what gets things done. Like if you are a executive in a public agency and you ask for something in your organization, you get it. If you are a frontline staff and you ask for information, you don't get it, or you don't get it as quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And so, title matters. And you're right. What that does is it does create these artificial barriers and artificial silos, which for one brief shining moment didn't exist.
Correct.
Right. It was almost as if like the
tide had turned.
structure that keeps all of the different universes apart, there was a rift, and all of a sudden, you had Spider-Man fighting with Batman, fighting with the what are those guys? The Watchmen. Like all these different universes came together
Mm-hmm.
to get a job done. And now that we are starting to come through that, and I still don't think we're there, but now that we're starting to come through that, it's like, okay, great, we can go back to the way we did things in February, because that always worked perfectly.
Yes, everybody's very
Right.
romantic about. Oh, remember when we used to be face to face? Everybody's very romantic about that lately.
Yeah.
And and they're also romantic about the old structures.
Yes.
And so the rapid iterations we saw early on while we were all remote, those early, all that collaboration, all that trust seems to have, it's kind of run its course for a bit, and everyone's like, there's been a stabilization. That stabilization, unfortunately, has rolled back to the silos that we were in.
Right.
And I think if you're seeing that, here's your chance before. I know people are going to start going back in the fall of this year and into next year to try and like stop that tide of
Right.
not going back, but of the silos and not collaborating, and titles don't matter. I think if you can do some things to stop that tide, that would be helpful before people start rolling back into the office at a more of a rate that we're at.
Yeah. And I still think, I mean, you do need to have titles, because I think that it creates accountability. But
Yeah.
that's a way of looking at titles through a positive lens of like, I am the owner of this business area. Ultimately, the buck stops with me if something goes sideways. As opposed to there's no owner, and then you're sharing accountability, which means there actually is no accountability.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you do need titles, but one of the things that, and maybe this is another element of transformational problems with people rushing back and changing back to reverting back to the old way, is that you almost use it as an excuse to pin accountability on a single party. So you say, I'm the CIO of this organization, and everyone looks to me to transform the business. Because, of course, wink, wink, technology is transformation, right? And transformation is technology. So, you almost end up with sort of a single point of failure, a lone wolf, if you will, who is responsible for it, and then they take it on their shoulders and feel like they need to be the driving force because they alone can fix it.
Correct. Instead of being back to the collaboration. And so I think the lone wolf and the silos are like hand in hand, right? So early on, a ton of collaboration, a ton of trust. And then as we stabilized in our current world, we saw kind of as a way to kind of normalize, we reverted back to the things that we knew. And so the lone wolf taking the ball and running with it and no longer bringing the rest of the team along has started to reemerge. And kind of that superstar mentality. It's like, I'm going to save the day as opposed to the team saving the day.
Right.
So that becomes, and if you see that starts to become a problem with your, not only your collaboration, but the velocity of which you can change.
Right.
And the velocity of your transformation.
Right. There really you can't have a transformation driven by a single person. You do need to have that collaboration.
It's a collection.
It has to be, because one person can't do it all. And I think in an earlier episode we talked about, I read it in one of the books that you lent me. I forget what it was called, but this is a ringing endorsement for that book.
Yeah, I can't remember the name,
but we talked about how Michael Jordan had his hands on the ball at the end of games,
right? Because
he was the star of his team, of the Chicago Bulls. Because with the Wizards, that wasn't Michael Jordan. That was when he came back from basketball. That was another guy. That was not Jordan. But anyways, that's neither here nor there.
When he came back from baseball?
From baseball, sorry. When he came back from baseball, it was like, yeah, I mean, your name is Michael Jordan, but you may as well be the actor Michael B. Jordan. Like, you're good, but you're not Michael Jordan anymore. And okay, whatever. I'm not going to hate on Jordan because he's Michael Jordan and I'm not. But the idea is, like, he had his hands on the ball to take that winning shot, and he was the star of that team. But without the rest of the team to get him to that point where he could take that final shot to try to win the game, without the team, he would not be in that position. So yeah, he might get the credit. He might be in the conversation of greatest player of all time. But without Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant and Dennis Rodman and Bill Cartwright and BJ Armstrong, and like, Michael Jordan can't be as effective, right? We talked about Tom Brady in an earlier episode. Without someone to catch the ball, I may as well be the starting quarterback,
right,
for the Pats,
right.
I think so. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things of the you may have been talking about The Last Dance on the Jordan document, the Bulls documentary, but
I still haven't seen that, actually.
Oh my God.
I just
Tremendous.
I am a knowledgeable person when it comes to useless information.
I think one of the things you saw in there is, yes, he did have the ball a lot early in his career and always wanted it at the final shot, but realized he wasn't going to win a championship if he couldn't bring the rest of his team along.
Right.
And so if he couldn't trust guys like Kerr near the end of the game, because everyone was looking that they were going to give the ball to him,
right,
where the rest of the guys were going to be open. So he needed to make sure he wasn't the lone wolf. And in the last plays of the game, would be okay with a fake to him and then to one of the other players like Pippen or Kerr. And so it's a good analogy for the lone wolf. Like one person is not going to drive your transformation. And
Nor should they have to.
They shouldn't have to. And I think what we saw early on was this major collaboration amongst departments, because, and as we've always talked about, if you start with your customer and look at the things they need to go through, they don't go through your company, one silo at a time to finish their journey. It's like blended. And so their journey takes them where it takes them, and then different areas in your company need to pull it all together in terms of a journey. And so if everyone's doing their own thing, obviously disjointed journey. And so that lone wolf siloed mentality is going to be a downfall as we start coming out of the COVID era into a new blended area of work. And if you don't have a way to have that dialogue to stop, the rise of the silos again and the lone wolf mentality, you're going to be back into the same trouble as we had during the transformation pre-COVID.
Right. Yeah, I talk about that in a lot of the workshops that I do. Is like your view of your process doesn't matter. Like and your customer,
it's your customer's
doesn't care, right? But your customer doesn't care, nor should they have to, about your process of getting their transaction done. They just want to know that it's done,
right?
And what you go through to make that happen isn't their concern. So you have to hand it off and get approvals from 8 areas. That's cool, but the fact that it now adds 8 extra days to them being able to get an answer to their problem, that's not cool. So look at things through that lens of value and what makes sense, so that you can give your customer what they want, when they want it, how they want it, like peace. So I mean, I think we've established many organizations operate in these silos, whether you're public organization, private industry, everyone's got these silos. Some of them do a better job of managing them. Some of them do a better job of pretending they're not there, but they exist in every organization. Why? Why do you think that is?
One, the culture hasn't changed to a customer-centric culture. Because if you, again, going back to your point, if you viewed the journey through the customer lens, you would realize how the silos are significantly and critically impacting that journey through your company.
Exactly the answer I was expecting.
Fantastic.
Whose fault is that?
So everyone's romantic about the grassroots, and I get it. I get the grassroots, and you need those people at the bottom who could do that work. But your leaders, the leaders need to be able, it needs to be mandatory,
right,
that silos do not exist. And that starts at the top. Just like culture, and I've talked about this.
Yes.
Culture starts at the top. The leadership, and it's just culture. So that culture starts at the top, and it has to come from your senior leadership. And I know everybody's romantic about, the grassroots movement. Yeah, you need that. But what drives it, what will drive the change, needs to come from the people that actually own those silos.
Yeah, because
they need to agree that those can no longer exist.
Right. Because I'm all for bottom up improvement. I'm all for it. But if you don't have support from the top, that isn't going to kill that or discourage it. Like if you have a culture that does not embrace being customer centric, or doesn't embrace continuous improvement or business analysis or business. I know you and I have been talking a lot about business design. if it doesn't embrace that, it
or
will
a
find
flattening,
it,
or a
but
flattening
it
of hierarchy,
or
or not,
whatever.
or shipping, and it's okay to fail. If it doesn't embrace that,
Yeah.
it won't happen.
No, it'll find a way to kill it.
Right.
And so then what ends up happening is those people that embrace that are no longer aligned to the business. They are your dissenters. They are your problem employees. Like, and that's not the case, but they get labeled as such because they are trying to break down barriers. They are trying to make things easier and better. But they're doing it in an environment that is not conducive to that.
Right.
And so they end up frustrated and either become, victims of presenteeism, where they just show up, but they're there, but they're not there, or they take their talents elsewhere.
Right.
Like LeBron, they take their talents to South Beach.
That's right. Like LeBron.
And by the way, I'd love to take my talents to South Beach, because
Or
I mean, maybe not now in a COVID context, but I mean, South Beach, man.
well, I've seen lots of advertisements lately about, if you're going to work from home, well, why don't you work in the Bahamas?
Yeah.
I'm like, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Why don't I work in the Bahamas or Barbados?
I think it was Barbados that's now doing a 1-year travel visa.
Really?
I think it was Barbados, or maybe it was one of the B's in the Caribbean.
Yes.
Is doing a 1-year visitor, like entrepreneur visa.
Jeez.
To encourage people to move down there and just live for the year.
Yeah.
And if you think about it,
That's
first
how
of
you
all,
do it.
I think that's the way to go. But if you think about it, I mean, for you and I, same time zone.
Yeah.
So what's the difference?
Yes.
Like,
because we have a mutual friend that needed to go back to Europe for personal reasons, and her day is a disaster because we just book meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have other people, you can't be like, oh, she's how many hours ahead, or like, so her day is completely a disaster.
Right.
Whereas, if you're in the Bahamas, sure, 8 o'clock's 8 o'clock.
Right.
It's cool.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and it makes me think maybe I want to go like 1 or 2 time zones west. Start my day early. Start at 7 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm done by 2 or 3.
Right.
And then there we go. Anyways, this is neither here nor there.
But we digress.
But yes. But what were we talking about?
I think
now I just want to go. I want to go work on the beach.
I want to go to the Bahamas.
Yeah.
So we were talking about, we went from silos to lone wolf to leadership.
That's right.
Which all those things lead to, and what was exciting about April, so March, April, May,
mm-hmm.
was the velocity at which work was getting done.
Yeah.
Which is the whole punchline of this. Broken down silos, leadership fully embraced in a different culture and a way of working. No lone wolf, do what needed to be done. And we had a velocity and scale there where companies, the government, our own federal government here in Canada, our provincial government, putting out new services, new product, new online services, coming up with different ways of dealing with problems, like faster than we've ever seen it,
mm-hmm.
right? Historical speed.
Yeah. Well, let's call it what it is. Government doesn't exactly have the best reputation for delivering rapidly.
At velocity and scale, they don't.
No.
And it was happening. And so what is now, what we can see, and you can see it both in insurance, and there was all these things that were happening. Now, the 4 things that we talked about are creeping in to stop that velocity and scale, right? Reverting back to the silos, reverting back to lone wolf.
Mm-hmm.
All the barriers that were there are starting to be put back up.
Mm.
And if we could say anything in this episode is there's still a chance to stop that movement, but it seems to be taking over. And as we move more towards going back, I fear that everything we learned is going to go away. Everything that we saw worked is going to revert back to a pre-COVID world when we head back into the office.
Yeah. Two things that I want to sort of build on there. The silos and the barriers that you say came down, that facilitated velocity.
Mm-hmm.
I actually don't think they came down. I would argue that we just ignored them out of necessity. So we're not rebuilding them.
Mm.
We're just back to reinforcing them.
Right. Well,
right.
Yes.
So like we pretended they weren't there because we had to. And now that we've gotten, and you hit on something I think important, we've gotten back to this place of comfort that, oh, okay, well, it's cool then. We can go back to this is mine and this is my little kingdom and that's your kingdom. And, maybe we can align our kingdoms through strategic marriage like they did in the medieval era, but through transfer, anyways, forced analogy. But, that's yours and that's mine. And let's not step on each other's toes. The other thing that, and by the way, let me preface this with, I think you're right. I think a lot of organizations are trying to go back to the old way, or return back to the way they did things pre-COVID. The problem is, or the what I see is that a lot of people have seen that this is possible, that there is a better way. And so my feeling is that new companies will emerge that will destroy the existing companies through doing things better.
Right. I think the most important set of people that could see it's possible are your customers or your citizens. They have seen it, like, wait a minute. Oh, so you can go that fast. You can put out products at that speed and they're half decent. So
we just raised their expectations.
We got a taste of what can happen in these last 5 or 6 months. So I'm expecting that to continue. I'm not expecting you to go back to a world that you weren't delivering in this way. Right.
Because now there's no reason not to.
Well, we've proved that you can. So now, before we proved, there was always an excuse, well, maybe they can't. So expectations were lowered.
Yeah.
The expectations are there. You can. So what's the problem now?
Right.
That is the point of this episode. As we come out and start either being in a blended world or you fully go back, your customers have realized that you can actually deliver good products and services and at a certain pace.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you stop doing that, then to your point, Vince, other companies will rise like a phoenix to take your customers.
Yeah. Particularly in private industry.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like there is always someone who will figure out how to build a better mousetrap. Public, I'm not so sure, because I think public agencies are generally so ingrained that it's hard to take them on. But you're right in that the expectations of our customers have changed, and that may be enough to force an acceleration of this behavior in public agencies, just because they don't want to deal with the negative blowback and the complaints, and they may do it out of necessity to avoid the pain that comes with unhappy customers.
Correct.
Right. Because at the end of the day, yes, public agencies are harder it's hard to create a new, Department of Defense if we're talking U.S. Like
Mm-hmm.
you don't have the resources to create an army unto yourself. You need, like, they are ingrained, but they still have to answer to somebody. And so they're still getting their budget from somebody. They're still getting, there's still a chain of approvals from somewhere. And if the people voice that they are unhappy with, again, the Department of Defense, then you can be sure that that's going to affect their perception and their budget and their ability to execute on what they want to do. So, they can't ignore their customers, but they can slow play them, maybe.
They can, but if you consistently get, poor satisfaction, complaints, the noise is what, and
Mhm.
so if that noise continues and continues and people keep hearing about it, your department's going to be questioned.
Yes.
Like, if you're not servicing the customers to their satisfaction, then why are you here?
Right.
Like, we'll get people that can do it. And so
Right.
now that expectation bar has been raised, I think those things, those satisfaction markers and that feedback will actually be at a new level.
Mhm.
And so if you can't deliver at the level of which the expectation has risen, there's going to be noise for your department.
Right.
Which is
actually,
your version of profit, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. Which actually leads to what I think is another one of those challenges, which is the competition for resource, for people, like the competition for talent is going to be is going to transform. And I think, because we've asked people to take on because we busted down those silos, or at least ignored them for a little bit,
right,
we were able to see what people could do when unfettered by the bureaucracy of organizations.
right.
And so those people are a lot more valuable than they were 6 months ago. And they probably know it. So, you're going to end up in a competition where you're actually going to have to actually do work to keep your staff.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of organizations work really, really hard in wooing a new hire, a new employee. And then once they have them, it's like, well, why do I need to?
Right.
Why do I have to win you over?
Right.
I think that goes away, and I think we're going to enter a market where, especially if companies remain remote, the talent pool just grew to the size of the globe. Companies are going to have to do, I know a lot of them do exit interviews. They're going to have to do stay interviews. Like, what can I do to keep you here? Not why are you leaving, and what do I have to do to get you? So what do I have to do to keep you? So talent is going to be at a premium,
and the talent is going to stay because of the reasons we just talked about.
Yes.
Culture, being able to flow between silos, like more collaborative towards a mission. And so the things we've talked about aren't just things you need for a transformation, but they're also things you need if you want to keep key people for your actual business, not just the transformation, to continue your business going. But those are the hallmarks of why someone would stay. If you don't have a good culture, if they can't make decisions to get products out that that customers are expecting, if it's okay to fail as long as they own that failure, and that if those things don't exist, you're not going to have the best people working for you, because they're going to go to a company that gives them that.
Right. Oh, you don't want me to work on the beach in Bermuda? Oh, well, I'm going to go to a company that will let me do that, because that's what I want to do. And especially if I'm in a remote world, it doesn't matter whether I'm at home or at Starbucks or halfway around the globe, as long as I can do what I need to do. And so, you're not going to let me do that because you want me in the office 5 days a week. Cool. I'm going to go somewhere where I can do that.
Right.
Because that's now important to me.
Yes. But it should also be important to companies. And the hardest is going to be traditional companies that were forced to somewhat work like digital native companies like Apple, Google. If they've wooed new people during this time, those talented people are going to expect that. And now people that have been working at traditional companies for a while now have seen how the other half lives and have seen their productivity, and they've seen that how they can continue to work maybe better.
Yeah.
And if they don't get these things that we've talked about, your fight for talent is just become harder.
Yeah. 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 And these are the things that extend beyond,
money,
the financial rewards.
That's right.
Right. Like, you could give someone, $500,000 a year, and if they're miserable, they are going to be looking elsewhere.
Yeah.
Money is no longer, it's still important. You still need it for other things, but this extends beyond. This is speaking to the person and what they value, and usually people value more than just their financial security. So I think things are going to get really, really interesting. I think, so we're looking at this from a Canadian perspective, just to disclosure here. Our situation with COVID is very different as compared with the US situation, at least as we record, today towards the end of August. So if there are US companies that are having this same discussion, I would actually say it's way too early for you. Whereas, some Canadian companies, I think we've got about 4,500 cases as of today across the country, active cases. It's still a lot, but it's not the, several million that you have in the US. So it's a different scale there. So, please don't rush. Please don't be in a rush to go back because you're feeling some of the pains that we talked about today. Figure out how to adapt to the new world, because the truth is it's going to make you much more effective when this finally does become an accepted way of working, because it will, and it might not be, this year or next year, but eventually, because of the blowing down or the ignoring of those barriers, we've seen that this can work.
It would be great instead of worrying about getting back, if you took this time to embrace that this is some version of this is the new world, but then build what that is. If you spent this time, you will actually come out of this ready for a 2028 world, because it is the way we're going to be going, as opposed to fighting because we're romantic about what pre-March was. So if you really, just like we've talked about, when you sit like through something like a service design and on purpose say what your customer should go through, sit and think about on purpose what your new work environment and work experience is and how you do work. And it's not just staying home like you have now because we were forced, and it's not just being at the office. It's some sort of blended version of that. And if you on purpose architect that, you will be a company that is, ready. It will be ready to take on a post-COVID world, because you've already thought about what that world looks like.
Right. And we debate service design, service and customer journeys. But I will say this: there's no reason why you couldn't apply those principles from the inside in perspective.
Absolutely.
Like, typically, we're using those, to understand what our customers go through, but we can apply those same principles
Absolutely.
to map the journey and the experience of our staff. And you're right, we can figure out, to optimize what is it that we want our staff to go through from a work perspective. And if you think that anybody wants to sit on a bus or in transit for an hour and a half to get to work for 8 hours and then repeat the process, you're crazy, because that is a ridiculous experience. Trust me, that is a ridiculous experience. So how do you then optimize your staff's experience so that you can attract and retain is key, your most talented people. So maybe that should maybe be a future.
I think while you were talking, I'm like, that is like another, that for sure is a topic we need to tackle.
Maybe we should end this broadcast and immediately start the next one.
Maybe.
Well, we've got maybe, I don't know. I'm tired. Okay. Anything else you want to add there, Michael?
I would like to hear what everyone, like, this is what we've heard from people. Like, it's been our experience from people we've talked to. What is your experience as, we've got more comfortable in this world and people talking about going back? Like, have you seen the comeback of silos and the old ways of working and the velocity falling? If you have, let us know. And I'd be interested to see what other perspectives there are on this. Yeah.
And they can hit you up at michaelmartino.ca.
Yes.
They can get me at vincentmirabelli.com. This has been...
Get us both on LinkedIn.
Oh, and we're on the LinkedIns and the Twitters.
We're on the LinkedIn, yes.
Instagrams, and we're all over the place. But yeah, hit us up. Let us know what you think. And thank you for your time and for listening this far. This has been a good one, Mike. And I still feel like we're only scratching the surface of this thing called business transformation. But we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for listening. This has been the Business Not As Usual podcast, and we'll see you next episode.
See ya.